femme that was born and raised in New York City. Currently, they live in Somerville, Massachusetts, where they plan on continuing to express their femininity. They are very passionate about disability, reproductive, and racial justice, as well as integrating intersections into topics like polyamory or sexual education reform. They also currently write articles for Where Your Voice magazine, including one of their most recent articles called A Disabled Being's Guide to Dominance. One of their biggest trademarks is their hair color, which changes more often than Boston temperatures. Without further ado, here's Mickey Thomas.
Thank you, everybody. Can everybody hear me? Can everybody hear me?
That's too loud.
Okay, I'm going to reiterate this, like the content warning. To summarize, I swear like a sailor, and this is going to be mostly about sex. If that makes you uncomfortable, I'm not offended. It's okay to go out and do a breather. I might also be talking about fetishization as well. So if you feel like you need to get out of that space as well, it's completely fine. I also speak fast. So if someone can tell me to slow down, that would be great. And so for all intents and purposes, wait, God darn it. Okay, so for all intents and purposes, before we start this workshop, slow down. Huh? Oh, okay, I was like, what's going on? So kink means sexual practices, concepts, or norms, I don't know why that says practices again, that deviate what is considered the norm. Non-kink related stuff is known as vanilla. Some examples of that, if you have been slapped and you enjoy that during sex, that is probably in the realm of kink. It can also be non-sexual, so if you enjoy wearing cat ears and drinking milk from a bowl, that is also considered kinky. That does not mean it's sexual. BDSM is a compound term that means bondage and discipline, dominant, submissive state of masochism. Not all people who are into kink will say that they're into BDSM, and not all people that are into BDSM will call themselves kinksters. This, similar to disabilities and stuff like that, my experience, when you heard one disabled kinkster's experience, guess what? You've only heard one disabled kinkster's experience. You have not heard the experiences of others. Now speaking, start with a quote that I am not going to read because that's too long, but basically I wrote an article and it was a disabled being's guide to doming, and it was basically saying, I am tired of people thinking that because I use a walker or I use a cane, that I cannot enjoy kink. That is bullshit, as much bullshit as the ADA, to be quite honest. A recent example that was put into play was one of my friends who is a power chair user in Berkeley. They were in a sexuality class in UC Berkeley, and for one of the things is, okay, we're going to go to the dungeon, so we'll talk about alternative sexuality. That's great, right? Fun. You get to see what goes behind the dungeon. Here's why I say that ADA is bullshit. There are steep stairs to go in there, and if you're using a power chair, I don't think you'll be able to use those stairs. And stuff like this is constantly hindering me from going out into the scene to find more people to play with and other stuff and things of the sort. Because all of a sudden, kinky, disabled people do not exist, and we do not have autonomy towards our own bodies. I grew up in New York City, New York, which is known for a lot of things. We also have a scene, a huge kink scene that I was a part of for a variety of reasons. Because when people think of BDSM or kink, they don't only think of 50 Shades of Grey, which is a bad example. It's a horrible example. They think of white upper middle class Manhattanites that are skipping their 9 to 5 afterwards to go to a play party that starts at 9 p.m. when I'm tired by 11, and the place is legit 2 hours away from my house in bumfuck Bronx, New York, near Westchester County. And on top of that, they don't have accessibility notes. So let's say you have to call, so we have Accessoride, which is the equivalent of the ride here. Guess what? You're fucked. They end after a certain time. On top of that, they sometimes don't tell you if the train station has elevators or not. So they're like, yeah, we're accessible. Our building's accessible. But we don't have a sensory room, so if it gets overwhelming, sorry, we don't fucking care about you. We don't care about you, we don't care about your walker. Oh, really? You got sensory overload? Sorry about that. Guess you're staying home and crying about that shit. And that is one of the reasons why I have so many issues with the kink community. They claim they want to let their freak flag fly, but that's only a certain type of freak. Your freak flag can fly as long as you are cisgender, which means not trans essentially, able-bodied, white, and upper middle class, or at least solidly middle class, to the point that you can have a nice house with a white picket fence and you might have 2.5 children and a small dog. If it's not small, it has to be a golden retriever and it has to be like a golden lab. It can't be like a black lab because black equals bad luck. But stuff like that hinders the idea that people like me, people with disabilities, have autonomy to their bodies. And that is also tied into desirability politics. When people see me, I make it known that I use a fucking walker. I make it known that I'm not gonna hook up with someone if they're on the 4th floor walk up. Because I have to lug my walker upstairs. If you don't have an elevator after a certain floor, don't talk to me. And that means for a lot of people, instead of seeing me, they see Audrey, who is right there. She's great, she's a wonderful walker, love her.
To conclude, I just want to say to anybody who's listening who has a mental illness, your illness may make you feel like you're alone.
Wait.
You are not alone.
What's going on?
We have an unprecedented number of resources at our disposal. We're in this together, we're stronger together, and we're bringing
Okay.
together.
Oh, I'm screaming. Okay, so continuing on. And that's one of my main issues with a lot of these scenes, even in the queer community, because whenever people think of queer kinksters, they do not think of a magenta-haired person who's black, who's fat, and who proudly shouts out they use a walker, and sometimes will incorporate that into play when they're really lazy but still want to have some fun time. And what comes into that is the fact that disabled bodies are considered undesirable, and that it's okay for other folks to fetishize our bodies, but that when we want to indulge in something that is awesome, consensual fun, then that is a major issue on so many levels. And on top of that, let's say you want to go to a dungeon. While the ADA does exist, it does not, honestly, it doesn't fucking protect you, to be completely honest. The ADA can only do so much. Like, for example, in the city of New York, and even in Boston, a lot of green light stations are not accessible. So let's say someone decides to keep a house party there. First of all, the house is probably not accessible, so you have to go up a few flights, like a couple of stairs. The green light station is not accessible. This was one of the major problems also here in New York City. Only out of 400 plus stations, less than 100 are accessible. That is less than a quarter. So if you are not privileged enough to live anywhere near where the scene is located, guess what? You're not gonna find the scene anyway. And not only is that ableist, that is also extremely classist. A lot of disabled folks live further out than where scenes are because of capitalism and gentrification and needing safer spaces and needing spaces with elevators. Cheaper spaces with elevators are not going to be in the metropolitan area. They're not going to be in areas where it's available to you, like available to other able-bodied folks. And that shuts us out even more. That's another example of how they literally treat our bodies as undesirable. And then when you go to a party, microaggressions happen. I've had gotten questions on people before. Wait, disabled people have sex? Wait, but how, do you use your walker during sex? Me, that's none of your fucking business. Hey, if this person is disabled, why are they into suspension? Me, that's none of your fucking business. If you would not ask this question to an able-bodied person, do not ask this to a disabled person. If they are into something, that is none of your fucking business to try to ask and try to be a private investigator when you would not do this for someone without a disability. And the next thing is talking about consent. People will constantly try to find ways to skirt through the idea that consent cannot, disabled people can't give consent all of a sudden, which is also men's chronic bullshit. Because consent can be given and taken in a variety of ways. Not just saying, yes, I want to do the thing, or yes, I agree to this. Safe words are a thing, first of all. Not only are safe words a thing, but also safe actions. Some people are nonverbal, but they still like doing things. That might mean when they want to consent, they either use sign language, or they make up like their own language, or they say it in writing that they consent to this. Similar, this also means that they can take away consent nonverbally as well. Just because someone is not verbal, or is not the idea of what a kinkster looks like, that's not an excuse to not ask for consent. And this shit like this is why so many disabled people are survivors of sexual violence, because they think that they have autonomy to our bodies. And that is bullshit. We have autonomy to our own bodies. And whether we express that autonomy by getting slapped in bed, getting choked, or maybe I'm a dom, so I like sitting on people sometimes to assert my dominance. That's our business, and that is for us to have our right to do that, and nobody else's. Because we need to start changing the narrative, and it's not us that has to start changing it. Able-bodied allies should also come through and make sure that they know that we're here, whether or not we can use the chair. We sometimes can't use the chair because it has happened to me before, I forgot to use my cane. But some of us don't have to use our aids all the time. That does not make us less disabled, and that also does not make us less unwanted. And whenever people are like, I wouldn't do this, that, or the other with a disabled person, and I'm like, oh, why? They're like, they just get a blank face like, I don't like the idea of taking. I'm like, just be honest, you think of us as burdens. But this is like a term of validation for all of you. You're not a burden. And if you're into some things, if you're into having sexy fun time, you have the right to be into that. Because also, if an able-bodied person comes up to you and asks you about these things, you also have the right to be like, it's none of your business, because guess what? It's not. And it's really important to remember that, because so many times able-bodied folks will try to gain autonomy over our bodies. And it's something that we've become accustomed to, and we shouldn't have to be. Just like when people try to coerce us into doing things we don't want to do, we shouldn't have to deal with that, because our bodies are our own. We shouldn't have to deal with fetishization, because our bodies are our own. Because our bodies are desirable regardless. Our bodies, what we like is none of people's business. And that is something I really wanted to bring home. So, I don't know how much time I have left. Right on time? Okay, so there are the ways to contact me. If you want my personal Facebook, shoot me an email. email and or ask me afterwards, and you shall receive.
Thank you, Mickey. If anybody has any questions, we'll take one or two.
Rachel and then Han, I are the questions I see.
So one of the things that happens in Massachusetts is that, and so welcome to the neighborhood, is that a lot of kink here is illegal because you cannot consent to assault, and which is the result of extremely overreaching, well-intentioned but misguided laws around domestic abuse. Right, well, no, actually, it came directly from that stuff, so it was, but yes, that too. So one of the things that happens is when you speak out here about inaccessibility or racism or any of these things, or ableism in the community, or you go after a space for being inaccessible, there's a very limited number of spaces that will even take kink things or somebody's private home because the stuff is illegal. So, you get accused of breaking up the community because, or somebody's going to get in trouble or something like that. I'm just wondering if you've got any perspective on how to address that other than, no fuck you, we count too.
So, I'm gonna summarize the question. Long story short, no, it's fine. I know how to summarize. I was in college for a few years, so learn how to bullshit. Long story short, in Massachusetts, they tried to, because of well-intentioned, kink is illegal, essentially. So the question is, how do we address this other than saying fuck you? And to be quite honest, that is a very good question. I think even in the UK they do this and it's really annoying. It's like, consent is really important, and understanding how that looks, as well as trying to maybe, I would say do it on a state level, but honestly that's ridiculous that we have to do it via state level. That question actually I'm gonna Google it later. Who else has a question? Thomas? Okay.
I don't need one. Hi. I think part of this consent phenomenon has to do with culture. We're basically overrun by laws. Instead of we're run by laws, by legal ramifications, and not by history, basically. Well, that's all. The country where I travel to most of the time it's very family oriented. And so the family culture becomes integrated into sexuality. So let's say the culture, the culture I'm referring to, people there get married pretty fast and hook up and long-term hookups happen pretty quick too. with our family first culture, it's much more acceptable for people with disabilities to consent.
I can't summarize that part of my disability. Oh, darn.
Was that more of a comment or a question?
With a comment.
Okay, thank you.
It's my personal observation, basically.
Yeah.
Because this country, because the country is ruled by laws that gives people with disabilities a harder access towards sexuality, whereas other cultures such as Latin American culture, it's much more family based. It's much more extended. So someone do when someone is in personal contact with someone else, and they like each other, the more likelihood the hookup will be, basically.